constitutional crossroads, power, precedent, and the people. A nation at a crossroads. A president seeking to reshape America, a judiciary standing in the way, and a Congress that is no longer silent. As battle lines are drawn, one question echoes across the nation. Who truly holds the power in America?
Fellow countrymen,
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, Lyndon Baines Johnson, do solemnly swear.
let us encourage individuals at home and nations abroad to do more for themselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
To a few of us here today, this is a solemn and most momentous occasion. And yet in the history of our nation, it is a commonplace occurrence. The orderly transfer of authority as called for in the Constitution.
President is neither prince nor pope, and I don't seek a window on men's souls. In fact, I yearn for a greater tolerance.
My fellow citizens, today we celebrate the mystery of American renewal.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
That I will execute
Faithfully the office of President of the United States.
President of the United States faithfully. So help me God.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute
That I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
the office of President of the United States.
January 2025. For the first time in modern history, a former president is sworn into office. For a second non-consecutive term, President Donald J. Trump, backed by a Republican-controlled Congress, enters the White House determined to push his agenda forward.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries, while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards, and created filthy pollution havens. This all happened with no response from the United States of America. But those days are over. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. In the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first.
Immigration, energy, education, the economy. His administration moves swiftly, but the response is immediate and fierce. Federal judges issued nationwide injunctions, blocking key policies. The courts argue these actions violate constitutional protections. The White House fires back, calling it judicial overreach, accusing the courts of obstructing the will of the people. Unlike past conflicts between the White House and the judiciary, this time, Congress is stepping in. With the president's party leading both chambers, Republican lawmakers are pushing for an unprecedented move, impeaching federal judges they claim are interfering with the president's constitutional authority under Article 2.
it's very important that judges remain neutral, okay? That they simply follow the law, and that their judgments are not biased. And when you take on a president and make a judgment, a binding judgment, a restraining order that says that a duly elected president cannot do what is clearly within his authority to do in Article 2 of the Constitution. I mean, President Trump for months and months has been telling the people exactly what he's going to do. All right. He's going to attack waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. And that's, the people elected him by an overwhelming margin. This is what they want him to do. It's within his constitutional authority under Article 2 to do it. So how does a judge simply have the authority to stop what a president is doing, a duly elected president, working within his constitutional authority? How can a judge do that and be a legitimate judge and not be truly a political activist? The judge can certainly disagree with what the president is doing, but he cannot use his judicial authority to stop a president from doing what he's been elected to do. So that in and of itself tells me that this judge is not qualified to be sitting on the bench. And so therefore the only recourse, federal judges are elected for life. So the only recourse is for Congress to impeach him. Judge McConnell isn't the only one that's been doing this. You've got Judge Engelmeyer, and you have a fellow colleague of mine, Eli Crane, who is drafting impeachment articles on Judge Engelmeyer for his political activism. And that's just what is so contrary to the three separate branches of our government. They have their responsibilities. You can't have one simply trod on the other's authority when it's within the Constitution, when it's legitimate and legal. I'm dealing with Judge McConnell, but there are other judges that are doing the same thing. This seems to be the left's tactic. I guess it's the only thing they've got left. They lost the election, they lost the Senate, they didn't gain the House back, so we still have control of the House. They lost the executive, so the only thing they can do is try and influence the judicial branch of government, which should not be interfering in either Congress or the executive on their, duly elected and within the Constitution power to execute on. And so I'm hoping that there are other members of Congress that will take on these other judges, because they need to understand that they're not going to get away with it. They can't just stop the president from doing what the Constitution gives him the authority to do, and the people have given him the authority to do. I don't think they actually have standing either to do this, okay? But I will tell you that I think the president will win on the merits. And I think some of these judges are realizing that this is outside the scope of their judicial authority, and the president will win on the merits if this has to go to the Supreme Court. But the problem becomes, the punishment to the nation becomes the process here. This judicial order is stopping the president from doing something that he's supposed to be doing. His duly elected authority. And so when you do that, you're not just hurting the president, you're hurting the American people, because they're the ones who elected him, and they're the ones who want him to do this, to exercise these specific authorities. And these judges are really denying the American people their rights. Most of the time, judges are pretty, they've got opinions, and they're certainly entitled to them, but they're not overt and political in mentioning them, because they don't want to be seen as potentially having a conflict of interest. And I think that's very, very much the case when it comes to both Judge Engelmeyer and Judge McConnell. I think the president will certainly prevail on the merits of his case.
Supporters of this move argue no unelected judge should be able to override executive decisions without cause. They claim judicial activism is undermining democracy, preventing the president from carrying out the policies he was elected to implement. But opponents warn this isn't just about one president, it's about the very foundation of American democracy. They argue targeting judges over policy rulings would shatter judicial independence, turn the courts into a political weapon, and set a dangerous precedent that could haunt every future administration. The Trump administration remains defiant. Officials claim the courts have become a political weapon against the executive branch. They insist the president's constitutional authority to lead must not be subject to constant judicial obstruction.
Showdown on Capitol Hill, Republicans trying to rein in the power of federal judges as legal battles go on over President Trump's agenda.
Time and time again, rogue judges have asserted, as though they were 5 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court.
Republicans on this committee are sending a message to anyone who dares to stand up to Donald Trump. If you step out of line, they will target you next.
Our Constitution did not create a plural executive or judicial tyranny. Today, we're far too close to both.
If President Trump's agenda is as popular as he claims, he can work with his allies in Congress to convince the American people to support it.
Who gets to make the call? Is it the guy whose name was on the ballot, or is it some bureaucrat? Is it the guy who got 77 million votes, or some district judge?
The Department of Government Efficiency, DOG, a new battlefront. Among the president's most controversial initiatives is the establishment of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Created by executive order, DOGE was tasked with reducing federal spending, cutting waste, tackling fraud, and streamlining government operations.
We have a very corrupt group of people in this country, and we're finding them out. We're removing all of the unnecessary, incompetent, and corrupt bureaucrats from the federal workforce. That's what we're doing. We want to make government smaller, more efficient. We want to keep the best people, and we're not going to keep the worst people.
Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that DOGE found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that DOGE identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one, $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that DOGE is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what DOGE is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to DOGE. And I also have a DOGE daily report, if anybody would like it, on all of the things that they are identifying and finding. We're happy to provide this information to you. We're talking about it every single day.
Are all those things you just mentioned fraud, or are they waste, or are they just contrary to the president's policies?
I would argue that all of these things are fraudulent, they are wasteful, and they are an abuse of the American taxpayer's dollar. This is not what the government should be spending money on. It's contrary to the president's priorities and agenda. And again, we can continue to provide you the receipts for all of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And if anybody in here wants to argue that the federal government is not fraudulent in some capacity, be my guest, because I think the American people watching at home would beg to differ.
Democratic lawmakers argue that the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, is not just targeting waste, but is being weaponized against federal programs they deem essential: environmental protections, healthcare funding, and public education. But their concerns go further. They claim DOGE is violating American privacy rights, breaching the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 and disregarding key ethics laws. They insist that Doge head Elon Musk lacks the constitutional authority to operate as he does, arguing that congressional oversight is needed. Yet, is this really about the law? Is this just one political party, the Democrat, expressing their opinion? Or are they scared of what Doge is going to find and expose?
First, I want to start with the Doge pushback that you and your colleagues have been trying to do from your roles in Congress. And you've actually got a new bill out this morning that we got a first look at. You've mastered the art of the trolling title in legislation because you call it the Bad Doge Act. But tell us about it and what you hope it would do.
Sure. This is the Bolstering American Democracy and Demanding Oversight in Government Ethics bill. And it's meant to address the abuses of power, the illegalities, the blatant attacks on our Constitution that Elon Musk and Doge are engaged in right now. So if you look at the White House executive order that created Doge, it very specifically authorized Doge as a, quote, temporary government organization. And that temporary government organization is, by law, limited to carrying out a specific study or project. In this case, it was supposed to be data modernization. Elon Musk, as we all know, was supposed to be a special government employee, a temporary employee whose role was limited to consulting and advisement. Obviously, they've gone way beyond that in ways that clearly are against their own mandate. If Donald Trump had said, we're going to have an agency that's going to be able to sweepingly fire millions of federal employees, to delete agencies with the flick of a switch, that would have required an act of Congress. It would have required Senate confirmation, and it would have required Elon Musk and his 25-year-old like buddies to have complied with a lot of different laws out there, which they are not complying with right now. So every day they're out there, they're violating the law. And of course, they're violating the law in many, many other ways. Stealing our data violates a lot of data privacy acts. They are violating the Impoundment Control Act, and dozens of different ethics laws are being violated every single day by these folks. But the real thing that they're engaging in that I think is so problematic is that they are attacking our Constitution. Even my 14, 12, and 9-year-olds all know this because they learn it in elementary school. The Congress, and only Congress, is tasked with making laws and appropriating money. And what Elon Musk is asserting right now is the ability unilaterally to be able to rewrite law, to delete agencies we've created, to redirect funding that we have authorized in Congress. There's a word for that. It's dictatorship, autocracy, monarchy. It is not a democracy. And that's what this is about. And of course, there's a myriad conflict of interest, the ways in which what they're doing is harmful and immoral to so many Americans out there. But at the end of the day, this is about the rule of law. And I started my career, as I mentioned to you earlier, at the SEC as a law professor. I've worked hard my whole career in trying to uphold the rule of law, and all of this offends my sensibilities.
When you talk about, though, the Bad Doge Act, I think that it gets the point across that you're talking about, the number of concerns that you and your colleagues have detailed. But the reality is on the Hill is that it's not going to pass, of course. And so what is your hope for legislation like this and for Americans who agree with you and the sentiments that you put forward in this bill, but they say, all right, if this can't become law, then what's the pushback? What's the pushback?
Well, look, first of all, I hope that this bill starts a conversation, both in Congress and maybe in households across the country.
But do you feel like the good faith conversations on the Hill are dead? I know you've only been there for a few weeks, but as someone who's been there for several years, it doesn't feel like there's very much good faith up there right now.
So I'm getting to know my colleagues still, right? Still believing in the American experiment and democracy, and I'm hoping that we can get some Republicans on this bill. We have a 3-vote minority right now. They have a 3-vote majority on the Republican side, and I'm hoping that a few of them, at least, maybe more than that, will remember the oath that we all took when we entered office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't say anything about Donald Trump or the president in that oath we took. It's about the Constitution of the United States, and that is what I'm hoping Republicans will do here.
According to a 2024 Congressional Budget Office report, federal waste and inefficiencies cost taxpayers over $200 billion annually. The administration argues that Doge is a necessary tool to rein in spending and hold federal agencies accountable. But the Democratic Party does not agree. At the heart of this conflict lies the U.S. Constitution. Article 2 clearly states the president is the head of the executive branch, but the judiciary has the power to interpret the law. Legal experts point to Marbury v. Madison, 1803, which established judicial review the Supreme Court's power to strike down executive actions deemed unconstitutional. But opponents argue nowhere in the Constitution does it grant courts the power to control how a president manages the executive branch. So the question remains, where does the authority of the courts end, and where does the power of the president begin? Some legal scholars fear if Trump's critics succeed in blocking Doge's actions, it could set a precedent, weakening the executive branch's ability to govern efficiently. Others warn, if Congress impeaches judges for blocking policies, it could shatter the very foundation of judicial independence. The storm ahead, the people decide. A major legal battle is unfolding over foreign aid spending and the power of the executive branch. On January 20th, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order freezing billions in foreign assistance, calling for a full review of U.S. aid programs. The president argued that too much American taxpayer money was funding wasteful projects and advancing a liberal agenda abroad. But on March 7, 2025, a federal judge, Judge Amir H. Ali, an appointee of former President Joe Biden, ruled against Trump's freeze, declaring that the administration must immediately release an estimated $2 billion to nonprofits and aid organizations affected by the policy. Legal experts are now clashing over the implications of this ruling. Does this violate the Impoundment Control Act of 1974? Does the executive branch have the power to control foreign aid spending? Or is this an attempt by the judiciary to interfere with executive authority under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution? The Trump administration argues that the president has the authority to review and halt funding decisions that impact national interests. But critics insist the judiciary's intervention sets a dangerous precedent, effectively handcuffing the president's ability to govern and enforce policy. The battle lines are drawn. Who truly has the final say on America's foreign aid spending? The president, Congress, or the courts? One thing is clear, the fight over power, precedence, and the people's money is far from over. And so the nation watches, waits, and wonders, are the courts defending democracy, or are they obstructing a duly elected president? Is Doge a necessary reform, or an overreach of power? And most importantly, what happens next? The Constitution was built to withstand political storms, but now every branch of government questions the legitimacy of the other, and the storm threatens to tear the system apart. The courts can rule, the president can act, Congress can retaliate, but in the end, the future of democracy rests in the hands of the people.